Hi,
Hi,
how's it
how are
going?
you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm really good. I'm super excited. I'm super excited. Thank you so much for taking the time.
No problem. Thank you for being flexible after yesterday. I was literally sitting in my house, laying on the couch watching TV, like, like just like running down time, like just waiting, just totally not paying attention.
It's fine. It really is, and it probably worked out better today.
Hmm.
Yesterday was kind of heavy. The energy was really heavy. I
Hmm.
had done like three spiritual readings, so I was feeling it.
Okay.
Yeah, I was tired, but
Yeah.
I'm glad that we're getting to have this conversation. And so I've been doing I've done a few interviews now, and it's weird because when I was like, I want to talk to you, because I keep telling my audience about you,
Hmm.
and I said, I think it'll be good for them to be exposed. I've posted, like the reposts and the rest of it, but
Hmm.
given that my platform is primarily about becoming an expat, building Black colonies abroad, but
Hmm.
I also understand and respect that that's not everybody's calling, and
Hmm.
that we all have work to do,
Hmm.
right? So I thought, let me have a conversation because really, I've been watching you. I have another name that I usually use for YouTube. I've been watching you since Locks. And
Oh
I mean, like,
yeah,
I've been watching you for at least
that has
four
to be
years.
like at least 4 or 5 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first saw you, I was like, yes, sis, because you've always talked about action.
Hmm.
Because a lot of people get on their platforms and they're complaining, which is justifiable. Like, we
Yes,
have grief. But
absolutely.
you've
We have
always
complaints.
Yes, but you've always presented your positions and your ideas not only based on how you feel, but because you've done the research, which is something I'm always telling my audience, like, you got to research your opinions. If you think whatever, I can respect that as long as you've done your research. And so I thought I would love to have an educated conversation because really, for the most part, I'm right there with you. I just didn't feel, I didn't feel I got over, I'll say, because I used to feel the desire to stay physically
Hmm.
and fight, and
Hmm.
then it changed and evolved into, well, maybe I should find colonies for us abroad. But I
Hmm.
wanted to talk about the importance of Juneteenth
Okay.
for American descendants of chattel slavery, the distinction of being an American descendant of chattel slavery,
Hmm.
because it's not something that I think there's not a lot of people having that conversation. And it's something that's very dear to my heart as well. So I wanted to
Hmm.
talk about that
Okay.
and actionable things that people can do if they are going to stay, because there's a lot of overlap with if you're going to leave. You still need to be,
Like still doing work.
yeah, you got to
Yeah.
do the work.
Not just
So
like peace, I'm out. Like abandoned ship.
because that is abandoning ship.
Yeah.
When you are leaving because you're an elitist and you don't want to do the work and you don't want to be bothered,
Right.
that's abandoning ship. And so I just wanted to be clear that that's how I see that. And so what I'm calling people to do, regardless of if they're going to stay in Canada or the US or the UK or wherever, or they're planning to leave, we still have to do the work because racism is global. It's just not deadly everywhere.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I've had like a few talks now with like some expats, and I do think it's really interesting seeing like the mindset amongst like various like Black American expats that are living abroad, because you do have some people that they just feel like, I couldn't, I felt like I couldn't, they're like, I couldn't get ahead in the United States, and I felt like I had a better, opportunity or a better chance of doing better abroad. And so it's really interesting seeing the people that kind of turn that. It's almost like you have some people that went left and some that went right. So you had some people that were like, I'm going to turn that into an opportunity for me to sort of, like, once I'm settled and I'm secure and I feel safe and I'm established, that's going to allow me to do more for Black Americans or do more for people back home. And then you have people that kind of go the other way that are just like, I don't care. Like, I'm out. Yeah. Like, I'm done. Like, I'm leaving. Like, I just can't, which I mean, I feel that too. Like that feeling of like, I can't take anymore. Like, I just have to go. So it's really interesting kind of seeing the people that kind of go left versus the people that go right. How long have you been living in Costa Rica? Hi to
I've
everyone.
been
I see everyone. Hi
Yeah,
too.
people are coming in. People are coming in. I'm so happy that they decided to, and it was like super short notice, but you know,
Hmm.
whoever hears the message hears it. I've been in Costa Rica almost 2 years, but I lived in Brazil for 5 years
Hmm.
uninterrupted from 23 to age 28
Hmm.
with small kids. And I was in Bahia in the north where there's, everybody looks like me and you. So it's like
Hmm.
not, so it was a very different experience. And when I left the first time, I was just outdone. I'm from Los Angeles. I was in LA. I was a little kid when the riots broke out
Hmm.
and they had the National Guard on the street. And I was just like, I don't want to live in a place where they're going to like have the military up and down the street because they don't want us to tear up our
Right.
stuff. It
Right.
was just, and by the time I was 7 or 8 years old, I was homeschooled most of that time. So I learned a lot independently of the history of the U.S., how it was founded, how our people were treated, all of that. And I was just like, oh, fuck this place. I don't want to be here. And I
Hmm.
knew very early. But I also felt, because it turned out, and this is kind of recent, it turns out that I am a direct descendant of one of the founders of Mound Bayou in Mississippi.
Oh
I don't know
wow.
if you're familiar,
Hmm.
but yeah, that's one of my great 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 grandfathers,
Hmm.
Isaiah Montgomery. And the whole concept of building independent Black communities, safe spaces that are outside of the reach of the system,
Right.
and the desire to be a part, like it is such a part of me, but getting to a place where I felt like it was no longer plausible to attempt to do within the
Implemented.
US was a breaking point for me. And it broke my heart. I'm not even going to lie.
Hmm.
But when I would talk to people about things that we could actually do, and then I did my history work on other communities that had experienced eminent domain and things like that, and it was like multiple, it was so many.
Hmm.
I thought, why don't I try to find a place that is more historically open to the possibility? Brazil is not that place. I
Right.
went there, I lived there. It was not that place.
They have
But
like
where
a
I am
German ruling
now,
class,
oh,
like Nazis. People don't know that.
people, but Seren, it's because people go, oh, well, everybody is sleeping with each other, so I guess it's not racist. Literally. And
Yikes.
it's the exact opposite.
I
That place,
mean,
I was
slavery
somebody's
time.
mate.
I mean, during slavery, like slaves was getting raped. That didn't mean it was not racist. I
It
don't.
changed because the Portuguese would actually put the slave that they had a bunch of babies with in their portraits, and so people, it's the
Felt like it
mindset,
was
like living
fine.
there. Hmm?
I said so. They felt like it was fine. Sorry, I see your question. Brazil has a German white ruling class. They said say that again. Brazil has what? Brazil has a German white ruling class, which is why you have somebody like Giselle Bundchen, the model, who's considered like Brazilian. And the reason why they have a German ruling class in Brazil is because after World War II, a lot of the Nazis were like ran out of Europe as war criminals, and a lot of them fled to Brazil, and they ended up in Brazil, like
Yep.
actual German Nazis. And now they
Yes.
have a white ruling German class in
Yes.
Brazil. It's wild.
Yes.
Once you read about it, you'd be like, what?
What? And it
What? You'd be
shows
like,
itself.
how? How is this
Something I
allowed?
tell everybody, Seren, everyone that comes in here, and they're like, well, how do I get started? I say, look, you have to look at a minimum of 50 years of history, but please look at 100 years of history in any country, because the country never seems to fully outrun its history, ever.
Mm-hmm.
There's
I don't think any
always,
country can.
I don't either. I don't either. What it's built on is what it's going to continue to be
Mm-hmm.
in general.
Yeah. I feel like that's why, I feel like that's something that people don't understand about the United States. Like, people don't understand that, like, the very foundation of the United States is anti-Black racism and American chattel slavery and the genocide against the indigenous Americans. And you can't really extract that from anything. Like, you can't extract that from anything. And I feel like what I always constantly think about is like Aetna. I feel like some of you guys might have like heard me talk about Aetna, but how Aetna was like, as an insurance company, it was like literally started to like insure like slave ships and to
Yes.
insure slaves. So they were like, you know,
Yes.
we need some type of insurance in case we lose our quote unquote property. If
Property.
like if our boat gets lost at sea, or if it sinks, or, you know, if our property jumps overboard, if they kill themselves, like we need some type of insurance so that we can get our money back for our property. And like, that's where you literally got these insurance companies that are still around to this day.
To this very minute.
Yeah.
Insuring your car.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're like multi-billion-dollar companies that were built out of, you know, Black bodies as capital. And you can't just be like, okay, we're just gonna like, you know, we're just gonna like put some cameras on the police and it's like gonna be fine. No, like, no, it's not. In everything, like it's sunken into the infrastructure.
It's in everything. And our participation in said system is continuing that investment. But yes. I know what we want is to extract what we're owed. There's three things I hear most from other Black people when they're like, you know, I'm thinking about it, or why did you, or how did you get over it? The guilt of abandoning ship, right?
Right.
My ancestors bled and died, so America owes me, which is a totally valid feeling, totally valid.
Right.
And if I give up the fight, then my children will never have XYZ.
Right.
Right. Oh, and what country is Cynthia? She's in the U.S.
I live in the United States, yeah. So for any of my followers that are coming in, I'm talking to the global Black girl. She lives in Costa Rica. So she's in Costa Rica. I'm in the U.S. Yes, I'm in the United States. So continue.
So, you know, those are the things that I hear the most. Oh, and number 4, which actually should be number 1, is that, well, why should I leave the U.S.? Because there's racism everywhere. Well, racism everywhere, yes, but it's not globally deadly. That you can look up. Like you can research that, right? Mm-hmm. And the separation, as you said, from the history of Black bodies being what underwrit. It's what underwrit everything. Everything is underwritten in the U.S. and the UK and Canada by Black and brown bodies, but especially Black bodies. Mm-hmm. And so this idea that you will ever be able to extract what's owed to you, it's impossible. I don't see how we can. And trust me, I wish that I did, but I don't see how we can, because what was given and what was taken and what was robbed went on for so long, and it has literally soaked the ground that we live on. Mm-hmm. and we're still in that fight. So these are more years that are passing, more more generations that are passing, and we're still asking for the same things. Mm-hmm. I don't know that it is viable to try to recoup that. So there's that. Yes. And then there's well, are you abandoning the fight? If I wasn't here having this conversation and I was just quietly living my life and not at all making myself a resource or accessible to have these conversations, to ignite people to think about what they're choosing to do. All I'm asking is that if you choose, whatever you choose, that you do it thoughtfully and with your community in mind, because you came to that conclusion thoughtfully, not just because it was most comfortable. Because a lot of the things that you bring up, like shopping Black and paying attention to who owns the company, that's work.
That is, and
it's work that nobody really wants to do, regardless. Yeah. You know, I think we've passed the point where we can just be lazy about it and hope that someone else is going to fix it. I don't think that that's viable.
Yeah. For me, I think that the way that I feel about leaving the United States, because I have been lucky enough, I've been privileged enough to like have traveled abroad like pretty extensively. For me, one of the main reasons why I guess you could say like I refuse to leave, I don't want to leave, I'm not going to leave, is I do feel like we are owed something, and I refuse to stop fighting for what we're owed here in the United States. And not even just for myself, for my family members, my children, but for the people that can't leave, you know, for the Black Americans that can't leave. So for the Black Americans that are in prison right now, you know, for the Black Americans that's sitting in prison for nonviolent marijuana offenses, and now marijuana is being like legalized everywhere, and like, you know, still sitting in jail, just chilling. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So like for the people that can't leave, so again, like the people that are in prison, the people that are out of prison, but they're felons, so they can't leave the country, or they can't leave their state, or they can't vote, or You know, or, you know, for the poor Black Americans that can't leave. I find it to be really interesting a lot of the times when, not we as in me and you, but when we collectively have a lot of conversations about, you know, staying in the United States versus leaving. I think a lot of the times the Black Americans that literally cannot leave don't have a voice and are left out of a lot of the conversations.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of the conversations rest on, I learned this term last year that I still like. It's called like the assumption of affluence.
Yes.
So it's sort of like the assumption that you have the money for the plane ticket, or you have the money to leave, or you have the money, you know, you have to pay money for a passport, you know, you have to pay money for visas, and, you know, that you even being able to leave your state or your country is a privilege that's like granted to you by the government. And there's tons of people that have had that taken away from them. So for me personally, I feel like even though I'm lucky enough, privileged enough that I do have the opportunity that I could leave if I wanted, I feel like I can't. Like, I can't. Like, I morally feel like I can't. Like, I have to continue to fight. And I do think it's possible. I think it's possible. I think that, especially, like, over the last month, the fact that I've seen people, like, seriously having discussions about, like, abolish police. If somebody had told me last year that abolishing and, like, defunding police was something that we were going to be having conversations about as like a mainstream talking point in 2020, I would have been like, nah.
No.
Like, no. So the fact that we're even like here, I think is really interesting. And like, I know people that believe, you know, we're never going to get reparations, or, you know, that we're never going to defund the police, that there's certain things we're never going to get. I just can't believe that. You
know what, but see, this is the thing, and I was thinking about this because I thought we're going to have this conversation, and I hope that people understand my intention. We, as intelligent, learned, thoughtful Black women, are representing the space that we both exist in because we exist in this fight together. There's so much guilt when you have any ideas that aren't exactly mainstream. A lot of the things that you've said through the years, a lot of people who are, you know, in the movement would never feel comfortable saying. But I've always respected that you felt comfortable saying it, because there's room for all of these thoughts and these approaches and these perspectives within us, because we're all thinking about it and we've come to these conclusions for a reason. And you're absolutely right. And that makes sense. And I wanted people who come across my page or who listen to me have these conversations on these lives to understand that I respect any position as long as it's thought through. As long as there's a reason and you've thought it through, because, you know, for clarity, and I've said this before, my parents had no desire to travel. I grew up very, very poor. My mom homeschooled us, but we lived, you know, but this is what I wanted since I was a kid. So I put all of my effort and my intention into manifesting this, because they weren't, and they're not here with me because they don't support it. I mean, they're
your
anti.
Parents still live in LA?
Yeah. Yes. Yes, they do. Right off of Crenshaw and Slauson, like, you know, that's where we're from. And I have not met very many people who were even interested in having the conversation, because it reeks so much of elitism. It reeks so much of exclusion. And there's this idea that the only way that you can accomplish it, if it is what you want it, is if you're able to do it by yourself. But just like setting up any kind of independent community within the States or in Europe or anywhere else, it will require collective pooling of resources, an agreement. There has to be an agreement on how to move forward. And those skills and requirements apply regardless of if you're going to stay where you are, if you're trying to leave. And so for me, having the conversation about the necessity to be willing to put your money and your time and your effort, or at least your effort, if you don't have anything else, into whatever it is that you say you believe or what your goals are. Oh, did I lose you? Seren, did I lose you? It's like spinning. Am I still connected? Yes. Guys, hold on just a minute. I lost her. Give it just a sec. She'll hop back in the room. I'm super excited and happy that we're able to have this conversation, because I really feel that this is going to allow us to be clearer about our own positions and why, and to hear these other perspectives. Because all kinds of, just like I said on Monday on my live, I don't know if I posted it, but we have to be active, you guys. We have to think about what it is that we're doing and put it into practice. It's absolutely necessary, regardless of what it is that we do. I think the time for hope that someone else is going to fix it has passed, and we need to put our work behind our intention. Oh, great. I'm glad you're patient. Yes, every role is important. Are you ever worried that Costa Rica can be invaded since they don't have a military? No. Part of the reason why is because historically, nobody has ever really fought for this place. They abolished their military a long, long time ago. And even though they're right next to Panama, which would be highly protected, if anybody was going to exert any kind of control, it would be over Panama, not Costa Rica. There isn't anything here that anybody wants bad enough to fight a war over. But that's a reasonable question. I was surprised when I remember doing my, oh no, we'll just come back in. Okay. Okay, we're waiting. She's coming back. She's coming back. Technical difficulties. We're still here. I can't hear you. We can see you, but I can't hear you. Can you hear me? She said, I don't know what's happening. No, I can't hear you. Your mouth. We're going to get this together. Oh, and who said thank you for creating this space? This is super important, guys. This is super important. Yeah, Mercury is so in retrograde. I think Venus is finally going direct, or it finally went direct, but Mercury is definitely in retrograde. Let's see. Your sound is just not, I don't know what's going on with your sound. Okay. BBYDMZZ. Yeah, I can hear you, but we can't hear you. You can hear me though. I don't know, it's weird. If you guys have any particular questions that you feel would be beneficial or would contribute to the conversation, there's a little question box next to the comment box. You can put it in there, and if I see it or Sharon sees it and it is going to, add to the conversation, then we may discuss it. If while we're waiting, if you have any questions for me, by all means, feel free to fill out it, put it in the comment section or put it in the question box. Let's see. Headphones, yeah, that's a good suggestion. Let's see.
Can you hear me?
Yes!
Yes!
Yes. We're going to do this. We are not giving up.
Listen, why is the FBI trying to shut down this conversation?
Because they don't want us to talk about this. That's why.
Get off my
we're talking about options.
Get off my page. FBI, Jesus Christ.
They don't want us to have a conversation. That's why.
The conversation started getting too hot. My phone said,
I got shut down the other day, and I was like, I didn't know that they did that on Instagram. I know they do that on YouTube Live. They'll shut people down fast. I didn't think they did that on Instagram.
It kicked me out. I don't know what just happened. It kicked me out. And then when I was trying to come back, there was no sound. What?
That's so weird. But no, you were just kind of talking, and I was kind of talking about it as well, because I think for me, what's really pushing and the energy that I'm picking up on and what I'm feeling the most is I'll tell you just like a short little anecdotal story. I worked in special ed for a lot of years. I worked with kids with cerebral palsy. I worked with kids, I worked with kids who were quadriplegic, all of that. And I was always amazed, like for the kids that had cerebral palsy, I had one boy, he can only move his head. And so the wheelchair was set up so he could move his head and he could like drive his wheelchair with his chin. And I remembered being, I don't know, I think I was 19, 20, really struggling. I had just had a baby. It was a nightmare. I was really going through it. And I remember thinking, this boy is exerting the amount of influence on the external world that he can. He's not, because I had another kid who could roll himself and he wouldn't, because he was depressed and he refused. But this boy who was moving with his chin was every day, he was going to his classes. He didn't ask for a lot of assistance, even though he needed a lot more than some of the other kids. And it taught me this lesson that, okay, I may not be able to affect everything, but what I can affect, I need to. Mm-hmm. I have an obligation to, because not only am I physically here and I'm capable of it, there are people who are not able to. So let me exert what I can in this life while I have access to it. It changed my life. It really did.
How did you decide on Costa Rica?
Because Costa Rica historically, I mean, there's a lot of reasons. One of the main reasons is it doesn't have a military. They abolished it a very long time ago. There is not this embedded history of, I mean, comparatively, like I said, there's racism everywhere. They did actually, until 1978, they didn't allow people of Afro descent to live in the Central Valley. They were required to remain on the Caribbean side, because there's a Caribbean side to Costa Rica. A lot of the people that are, they call them Limonians, because on Limon, on the Caribbean side, most of them immigrated from Jamaica for work. They worked in Panama, they worked in Costa Rica, and they had some colonies in Nicaragua on the Caribbean side. A lot of people don't know that. But they have their own racial history and their own history of racism, and I experienced it when I was buying my house here. However, I have never felt physically threatened. I've had interactions with police and other, governmental agents. I have never felt or even witnessed violence. It's just overall culturally, it's not a violent place. People they don't interact that way. So the element of violence and danger is gone. Second, so this leads to my second point. I was thinking about places where large amounts of us could congregate, own property without needing a lot of money, because the residency requirements are very lax. Mm-hmm. They don't even require you to be a resident. You can actually open a business. You can buy property. You can open a bank account on your tourist visa. Not very many countries are that accessible. So that was a great benefit as well. And I thought if I got somewhere, found a location that was really beautiful, that was accessible, that had good infrastructure, that had good solid internet, that had land and all of the things that I was looking for as far as infrastructure, if I brought people here, how would they be received? Well, there's almost no violence. So I'm not fearful of anyone coming and burning our houses down in the night or trying to poison us. Right. I wasn't worried about that. There's amazing infrastructure as far as food and water. Costa Rica has a watershed, an unbelievably high amount of water and food. You can grow your own food. We can be completely self-sufficient, and I'm not afraid of violence. And so much of my information and what informed me.
Costa Rica. Somebody said where?
Yeah, I live in Costa Rica. Most of what was fueling my decisions and my research was, where will we be safe? Where can we be safe? Because when I'm looking at where to live in the U.S., the number one consideration is, where is it the least racist? Where is it the least likely that I'm going to get killed by the police? I remember doing that research, thinking about moving to Texas or moving to Florida.
Yeah, a lot of people want to do that type of thing in the South. So you don't think it's possible to do in the U.S.?
Given the history, my own family history, and the research that I've done, I see certain things as a problem. Mm-hmm. As long as eminent domain is on the books and they can take it from you, they can.
Right.
As long as they can determine that, you know, the house next door, the property next door is a Superfund site, then you got to leave.
Right.
I know of communities that aren't even necessarily, you know, purposeful or intentional Black communities that have pig farms nearby or chicken farms nearby that are seeping all kind of mess into the water, and they know it. They know how it's affecting Black people in the neighboring towns, and nothing's done. It's just all of these constant micro and macro aggressions and violence, nonstop violence, that I just did not want to continue to fight that fight of violence. Racism I'm going to have to fight, but do I have to fight violence too, outright violence, when historically it's proven that people get to treat us any old kind of way, and very little I didn't want that.
Right.
I don't have to worry about that here. The locals don't have to worry about it, and neither do I. You know, I mean, so for me, I wanted to skip past the obvious violence and threat of death to get to the building part. So that's what informed my decision. And I sacrificed a lot. I didn't finish college so that I could use the money that I did get access to buy a property in Texas for $75,000. Worked on it myself, me and my ex-husband, and we sold it. And that's how I got the money to go to Brazil.
Okay.
I sold the house that I inherited in Los Angeles. That's how we got the money to come here. You know what I mean? So like what access I've had, I've used it to try to get out.
Right.
Because
I
for
feel
me,
like some people would say that by selling your house in Los Angeles, though, do you feel like you contributed to gentrification? I don't know who you sold your house to. I don't know. But
I sold it to a Black man.
I know a lot of people have been having conversations about Black Americans that do inherit homes, property, things of that nature, selling and using the money for other things. And a lot of people are starting to have conversations about, like, should we stay or should we rent it out? Or, you know, when we move out and then other people move in, is that contributing to the turnover of the neighborhood?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because this was like the cornerstone of my late nights and me not being able to sleep at night. So, and I know that you're very, you know, historically aware. So here's the thing. A lot of people in my grandparents' age had, you know, they were the first ones to get jobs that had, you know, a really good retirement. And they were the first ones in their family to get access to being able to buy property. What happened was mismanagement. So that house that I got was above its head in debt and in terrible condition. And so myself and my husband poured money into a home that was not cared for. Even the most basic of things. We spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for no other purpose than because we did not want to sell one of the last few Black-owned homes in View Park, Ladera Heights, because that's where I'm from. It was a nightmare. I was so overwhelmed and frustrated, because I remembered as a teenager, my parents telling my grandparents, me telling my grandparents, can you guys stop mortgaging the house, putting 8,000 liens on it so you can go to the racetrack? And, you know, like, it was so poorly managed. So that then when I stepped up and said, please let me have the opportunity to try to save this house, I was spending double just in the mortgage and having to pay to, like, get the electrical fix, and just craziness. I was sunk. And I had to look at it and go, am I bankrupting my future trying to hold on to the past, to what was never my responsibility in the first place? And when I tell you, Seren, I cried and I was frustrated and I begged and I asked for help, and I tried everything I could. And it occurred to me then, I have children, I have a husband, I have a life that I want to have, and I'm literally miserable because my grandparents and my parents did not have the care for their progeny to take care of this. And so it didn't make sense for me to financially sink myself holding on to an idea. Because if it had mattered to them, it would have been a benefit, right? When you inherit something that is almost free and clear, because I saw it a lot. A lot of the people I grew up with, their grandparents, their parents had done well, and so they were able to inherit property and pass on generational wealth. What I received was generational debt.
Yeah, because it wasn't paid off.
Because it was nowhere near paid off. It was underwater. So when we sold it at an opportune time, I mean to the day, we were able to get a little money out of it. We didn't get all that we had invested into it, but we were able to recoup something. But it's the mindset of removing the guilt. I did sell to a Black man, thank God, but who knows who he's going to sell. You know, I don't know.
Right. It's out of your hands after that.
It's out of my hands. But no, it's a fair question, because these are the conversations that we have to look at and have.
Yeah.
Generational debt is a real thing.
Yeah. I see some of these comments. Trey, generational debt is so pervasive among BAs. Trey, I also saw your other question. He said, how is the language barrier in Costa Rica? And I also saw another question, but let me see these other ones, because I saw some of these. Would that not be victim blaming as the assumption in capitalism? That was like about the house. Who's going to buy the properties, and shouldn't Black folks be able to sell if it's an option? What difference does that make if the neighborhood is unsafe for us, regardless of the degree to which we blend? So I just wanted to address those really quick. And then if you want it, we could talk about like the language barrier. So I think it's really interesting. Yes, we are talking about capitalism and capitalist consumption. And I do think that it's hardly ever talked about when we talk about generational wealth and like wealth building through like home ownership and land ownership. A lot of the times we as Black Americans don't talk about the fact that like the wealth is built by selling. Like that's kind of how the wealth is built. Like you get to a certain point with the property, and then you sell the property and you make a profit, and then you rinse and repeat, and that's how the money, you know, gets up. And I do think it's interesting, because for us, there is other elements to homeownership that we do have to take into consideration, like the safety of the neighborhood, or, you know, if we do sell, are we going to be selling to a white person? And these are all things that other people don't have to take into consideration. So those are really fair points. But with regards to neighborhood safety, I do think that a lot of Black Americans don't want to be responsible for neighborhood safety. I think that's because in general, in the United States, we glorify police so much, like propaganda, to the point where people think that police are supposed to be in charge of everything. But I think that, so I believe in like autonomous communities, be it in Costa Rica, be it in the United States. I believe I believe in Black autonomy. So when we talk about safety of a neighborhood and a neighborhood being unsafe, I don't believe in like calling the police or whatever for neighborhood safety. Yeah, exactly. I think that we can patrol our own neighborhoods. I talk a lot about community patrolling. When we start, like, ordinary people, they have a community patrol. I was just reading, they have one right now in Minneapolis, because they like disbanded the police department. The police department isn't doing anything. So like groups of Black Americans are now armed citizens, legally armed citizens, are now patrolling Minneapolis themselves, because even before they said they were disbanding the police, when there was like all those like fires and things that were being started, there were a lot of Black business owners that said they tried to call the police and they tried to call the fire department and nobody came, right? Which is like historic for us, right?
That's like, what they've been doing forever.
That's what they've been doing. Like, so you cannot, I don't think you can rely on outside forces to keep your community safe, but it is hard and scary and terrifying to say I'm going to take that type of thing into my own hands. But we have seen it in other places. You have Mothers Against Senseless Killings, MASK in Chicago, which is literally like moms that patrol neighborhoods. You know, you've had the original Crips and Bloods gang members, which were neighborhood and community patrols. Yeah. So I think that I'm not really, I feel like Black Americans have now been like brainwashed and indoctrinated to really
it's so weird. It's
that
so
we need all this like outside influence and help and assistance to keep our neighborhoods safe, to keep our neighborhoods up to par. I don't believe that.
But to that point, Seren, and it's interesting that they brought that up, because when I did a live and I was talking about Mound Bayou and Allensworth and all of these places that were like really completely self-contained and insulated, and how there's a responsibility of people that are participants or that live in that community to take personal ownership.
Right.
But if you're lazy and you want someone else to do it, then you're going to keep begging the system, saying that it's broken, for them to fix it, when in reality it's working exactly the way that they created it.
Yeah.
It's not for, you can't, whatever a bit of influence that you can have, you should try to use that influence. If that's joining Community Watch, if that, whatever it is, I think right now is a call to action, like a literal call to action. It is your neighborhood. These are your communities. You know, we have to stop, like you said, get out of this brainwashing about the police. It boggles my mind when people are like, oh, well, why would I not believe what the police said? Or why would I not call the police? Like, you know how they interact with us.
I would never call
what have they done that would earn that amount of loyalty and trust from our community?
Right. I was on a live stream and we were talking about abolishing the police, and someone said that. They were like, well, if we abolish police, what will we do if we need help? I was like, of all the people watching this live stream right now, I want to know how many of you have, number one, how many of you have actually called the police when you needed help? Out of the people that did it, how many times were the police actually helpful? Did they actually help, or did they make the situation worse?
And they exacerbate.
Many of us, when we needed help, have we thought twice before calling? Like, we're already existing in a mindset where we already don't trust the police. We already don't trust the infrastructure. And so that's why I feel like we need Black autonomous communities to just completely remove, like, I'm not trying to fix no infrastructure. Like I don't want to be a part of it. Like, I just want to, like, remove from it. Like, I don't believe there's fixing police. I just don't believe that. Like,
Me either.
I don't believe that there's any fixing government. Like, people know, like, I'm not into the bipartisan system and stuff. Like, I don't believe that. I do still believe, maybe I'm an optimist. Like, I've talked to people that said they feel like I'm an optimist, but I do still believe that we can create autonomous Black communities in the United States. And it's interesting too, because, like, I've done a couple cross-country, like, road trips, and it's interesting, number one, when you see, like, how huge the United States is.
It's
and
enormous.
Like, so much, like, huge swaths of, like, unincorporated land, and even, like, unincorporated towns. Like, I was in like, rural upstate Washington, and there's, like, unincorporated towns. Like, the towns are not really even considered a part of anything, you know, and they have, like, a population of, like, 300 people or whatever. I stopped to get gas. It was literally like a analog gas pump, like, with the numbers that's, like, rolling.
Yes.
And I have to, like, constantly, like, hit the pump. So I do think that we can do it. We can establish it. I know, like I said before, I know a lot of people feel like the South, you know, like, unincorporated land in the South and in, like, certain areas. And this, I know a lot of people say the South because they feel like it's still affordable. Like, a lot of Black Americans could, like, maybe band together and create sort of, like, new towns and communities, sort of similar to a lot of the things that we were seeing, like, pre-integration. But I do agree that all that stuff, it requires a lot of work. And I do think that in a lot of ways, not that people don't want to do the work, but that it's hard, you know, like, it's hard. It's hard to even conceptualize. Like, it's so hard for people to conceptualize, we want to defund the police. That's, like, a hard concept for people to grasp.
Well, even to that point, Seren, because one of the things that I've been really feeling super frustrated about is this: when people are talking about creating these independent, autonomous Black communities, a lot of times the language, and I don't think it's intentional, but a lot of the times the language is a little shady towards our ancestors, as if they did something wrong and that's why it didn't work. And it's not about what they did or did not do. It's about the fact that the system itself focuses in on us to attack us, regardless. When I say I don't believe in it, it's not because I don't believe in our ability, because I believe in our ability. I believe in our ability to do everything.
Right.
My concern is the powers that be. That's my issue, because I know that we are more than capable. I just can't fathom, and this happened in my 20s when I came back from Brazil, because I was thinking about it like, okay, you did Brazil, you saw what that looked like. I had done the research, and I was actually in the beginning process of getting a community together. I found out that you had to have a minimum of 200 people living together in a community in land that was owned by one owner, and then you could actually apply to get recognition from the government as your own town. Like, I did my research, but I decided that, you know, a lot of things happened. I came back to the States, and I was like, well, maybe I should try here. You know, it's been discussed for a really long time. My lack of faith is not in our people as much as it's believing that there's going to be a break in this system to allow for us to be free.
Like, people are still too attached to the system. They believe in it, so they don't want to.
That's my concern. But I think that if we are all in our particular section of this fight committed and we're putting in the work, all of the things can happen. But we have to work.
I agree. That's why, like, I like that you're in Costa Rica, and I like seeing like I want Black autonomous communities like globally, because I feel like number one, I feel like white people are the global minority. So it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense that like white people have so much worldwide, because they are a global minority. Like, it makes no sense.
Yes.
And I definitely think that we need to establish, like autonomous communities here in the United States as well as abroad for Black people. And I also think that, I personally think of it as like we're in a war. And I think that that's people as well, that type of thinking, that type of mindset, because it's sort of like when you say like, well, you know, oh, I know for a fact that there's like this amount of unincorporated land in the middle of Arizona, that if we got enough Black, you know, Americans together, that we could like buy it and we could like all move there and we could like establish a town and like establish ourselves. And then people would be like, well, you know, when we tried to do that previously, Black Wall Street or, you know, Tulsa, Oklahoma, it got like burned down and this, that, and the third. And then it's like, yeah, that's why this time around we're going to do community patrolling. We're going to have all type of guns,
all the guns,
all the semi-automatic, automatic weapons, you know, like everything. Like, when people ask me, how do I feel when I see like those armed Black Americans that like escorted that like Black lady into her job, I was like, I feel good. I was like, I know that people are against guns, they're against violence, you know, they don't feel like that's ever the answer, whatever, but it's like, I really feel like guns and money is the only thing that people understand. Like, I was literally just talking about Elaine Brown. Who was the one and only Black woman leader of the Black Panthers. And that's what she said when she like came to power and like started running the Black Panthers. She was like, I have all the guns and I have all the money. I can squash any rebellion from the inside of the Black Panthers. I can squash any rebellion from the outside of the Black Panthers. Like, comrades, like, this is what it's about. And I think people don't like that when you say like, well, if we're going to mobilize and we're going to establish our own communities here in the United States, like how you said in Costa Rica, there's no military there. So you don't have to think about that. But it's like, if we're going to do that type of thing here in the United States, we have to be prepared to possibly, you know, have a Black militia.
Listen, if my husband was still there, he would have a militia in Los Angeles right now. Because like that's what it was. He was like, okay, so if it's go time, it's go time. Because he's very much so on that.
And I personally feel like that's the only reason why we're even having this, whatever this quote unquote cultural shift now in the United States, where now we have to talk about Black Lives Matter. Netflix got a whole Black suffering section and shit. The reason why we're even having this conversation now is because this time around, niggas started lighting shit on fire. Niggas started breaking shit. Niggas started running up in Sephora and running up over in fucking Beverly Hills. Like, they didn't keep that shit in Crenshaw. Like, they went over to Beverly Hills and was lighting shit up. Niggas was talking about, oh, we're not gonna support the white supremacist infrastructure anymore. We're gonna start like exclusively buying Black. That's money and violence. And I feel like as soon as Black Americans this time around started running up and shit, lighting shit on fire, doing all this type of stuff, now all of a sudden it's like, oh, now they hear us. Now we have to have all these conversations. And now, you know, all these major corporations want to talk about it, which is still bullshit. But I really feel like that's the reason why it's even having this response right now, is because we started talking their language, but it's like people are scared to talk their language. They don't want to.
Because it has to be a critical mass of people who are absolutely willing to, yes, who are not going to be solely comfortable engaging in violence against each other, but they're willing to see the enemy and protect their communities. Right. That's really important. And like you said, it's going to require that. Yeah. And our ancestors did.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
But it's going to require that now.
The reason why I bring up automatic and semi-automatic weapons is because, maybe this sounds morbid to say, but it's also like the weaponry that we have now in 2020 is not the same weaponry that we had in 1920. It's
true.
Not the same weaponry that we had in 1820. It's not the same weaponry that, I think all the time about Dave Chappelle, when Dave Chappelle has on the fucking little skit where the slave master fucking tries to like crack the whip on him, and he says like, "That's a nice whip. This is a gun." Like this is because they travel through time. It's like, this is a pistol, pow, and he shot him and killed him. So it's just like, I do also think that with a lot of us that do sort of study, and I've seen somebody bring up MOVE. Yes, I know about MOVE in Philadelphia, the MOVE bombing. I think that for a lot of us that do study history and academic and activist movements previously, it's almost like we don't always necessarily apply the tools that we have now in 2020.
Oh, absolutely.
When we think about what can be done, we don't necessarily think of the tools that we have now. Like, we didn't have social media. Even the MOVE bombing, which was like the 90s, there was no social media. There was no, there were still certain tools that we have now that we didn't have then. So I do also feel like it's a little disingenuous when people say like, well, we can't do it now because when we tried to do it previously, this and this happened. It's like, it is 2020 now. Like, we could try again. We don't have to be stomped down before we even try. That's just how I feel.
I think if you feel moved to do it, it's because that's what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Like, I have so much respect for what our innermost self is screaming at us to do. That has to be honored.
Yeah.
It really does. It has to be honored. Whether or not there's enough people, whether or not it looks like it won't work. Because, we're having this conversation. I think a lot of your perspectives, maybe a little bit more mainstream than mine. I don't know, but I feel like we're both kind of like not mainstream. I can't get anybody to talk to me about any of this. Like, they don't even want to have the conversation. Like,
I can't get anybody to talk to me.
I know.
The people that fuck with me, but like on a mainstream, no. They think I'm, people are just now coming around to things I had said like 6 years ago that they felt was like, a few, like years ago when I still had dreads, I did a video where I was like, we need to abolish the police and we need community patrolling. And people were like, no, we need the police. We need that's why I said, even if last year you told me that in 2020 we were going to be having this conversation, I would have been like, nah, they're not ready. So, because like I'm seen as like radical, like anarchist, because I feel like fuck all this shit. Like, people trying to get a seat at the table. I'm like, flip the table. Niggas need their own table. Like,
yeah.
I don't want to sit at that fucking I don't want one little seat at that table. Fuck this table. Like, no.
But like you said, war, right?
Yeah.
When you're in war, not everybody is on the front line. Not everybody is behind the scenes. Not everybody's in one place. We need to disperse and like work from different angles to get this done.
Yeah, I agree. Which is why
it's required.
I like having these conversations with all different types of people, because which I also feel like that's something that maybe social media has impacted. I feel like revolution is like a car, right? So it's like some people that, they the steering wheel, they drive. Some people are the brake. People think everybody want to be in the driver's seat and everybody want their way to be like the way.
The only way.
Even if you in the driver's seat driving, you feel like you all that, my nigga, you still need the brake. Like, if you don't have them brakes, if you don't have that that gear shift, if you don't have that gas so you can go faster or slower, if you don't have, like, everybody has their own role to play, and you need every single role in order for the car to move.
Like,
we need everybody. So
exactly.
I feel like everybody should be able to, like, I don't have nothing against people that leave, because I feel like I totally understand the thought process of, like, I cannot do what I want in the United States, and so I have the opportunity to maybe try and build something better elsewhere. That's a totally valid
Most of
point
them,
of
though,
view.
don't fuck with me because I'm like, I know why you really left.
And why do they really leave?
Most of them, like I said, are trying to outrun or escape their blackness, or they like to be the exceptional Negro when they're the only one.
Like they want to
a
be
lot
the
of
only
them,
Black American there.
a lot of them love that. They soak it up. They love it. They love it. They love it. They love to be the only. They love to be the, because, you know, our culture is exported globally. So
Right.
if you get to go and you say, hey, I'm from Chicago, or hey, I'm from Los Angeles, or hey, I'm from DC, and there's no other Black Americans around, you get, I mean, I've watched
special
it.
treatment.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. And, you know, aside from that, or they are elitist, or they don't really love or want to fuck with Black people, and they don't like it when they see you.
Right.
And somebody, I did an interview, and somebody had the nerve to get in my comment section talking about, oh, well, that's not true. And when Black, and because I said in the interview that most of the time when I see Black men in other countries, they either don't make eye contact with me, which is generally what happens, or they won't even speak. I'll hear them speaking English, they'll hear me, and they won't even look. It just happened to me and my husband the day before yesterday. We're in a small restaurant. There's only like 8 people in there, and this Black American man comes in and doesn't even make eye contact, doesn't speak, nothing. I see this constantly. Or they're going to exploit and take advantage of the women in the country,
now
which is
the going, all of that, and especially the going for the exploitation. That is something that I feel like is like learned white behavior.
Yes, it is.
To me, like, I did a whole video on global arbitrage and this whole concept of, like, I'm gonna go abroad specifically because to exploit the native people in that place, even if those people are also Black. I'm going to try and make as much money as I can. I'm going to try and take advantage of the poverty. I'm going to try to take advantage of the women. Like, I'm going to try and take advantage. And I feel like so many people have a colonizer mindset. And I also feel like a lot of people come also to the United States with this mindset. It's really interesting to me. Like, I know that as a Black, and I've also experienced this. Like, I know that as a Black American abroad, as soon as they find out that I'm American and I'm a Black American, I get like certain type of special treatment. I know this. I've also experienced this, which is how I also know that you have some people that come to the United States and they're seen as like better than the Black Americans, and
because they're immigrant. Right. They're immigrant Black. They're special Black.
It's like we can't talk about. But it's like we cannot talk about this. It's like people don't want to talk about it. Like, it's so weird that people don't want to talk about it. They don't want to recognize that this is a real situation that really happens.
I talk about it.
I've experienced it in the U.S. Like, you've experienced it abroad. It's so weird.
My grandmother is Bahamian, right? So she very much so talked to me in no uncertain terms about the benefits of being an immigrant Black person from the Bahamas, and utilized it and looked down on descendants of American chattel slavery, just like most other. And I can generalize because this is what I grew up. I saw my grandmother and all of her cousins benefiting from othering or distancing themselves from us and looking down on my father and his side of the family. Right? Now, she married an American Black man from Mississippi in Atlanta and had my mom. And then my father is from Ohio and from Mississippi and Louisiana. That's where his people are from. But she always
looked at
Yeah, absolutely. And it was like, I know what that is. It's taking advantage and occupying space. And this is where I wanted to kind of talk about Juneteenth, because I had a lot of issues with how descendants of chattel slavery were all in the cash at me and support me and
all mixy, so mixy.
Wait, we're time running out, but I'll hop back on.